Hi folks, and welcome back to Lonely Horde Guitars. Today we are going to take some lumber here and we are going to turn it into kerfing so that we may do the kerfing on all of these bodies in flight. So before we get rolling on that, I want to say thank you to all the folks who gave feedback on the short about the color choice for the side bracing on this curly koa body. There were a few folks that liked the walnut, a few folks that liked the sapele, but overwhelmingly most people went for the rosewood. And that's the kind of feedback I like to hear. So personally, my own color choices are a little bit more conservative, but what I find when I put it up for a vote, and actually what the customers seem to go for, is they really like the bold color choices and the strong contrast. So that's the kind of stuff I need to keep hearing. I appreciate it. So now let's go ahead and get going with how we are going to make this kerfing out of these chunks of lumber. Okay, sort of the first stage before we get into doing any of the kerfing style cuts is we need to dimension some lumber to about this, which is about 1/4 by 1/2 inch. This is some basswood that I did earlier, so it's all ready to go into the kerfing jig. But how we get there, I kind of want to maybe do a little bit of an explanation. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to make about a 5/16 inch cut on the bandsaw. So this is going to be so that we can get a nice thin piece, which we will then rip into 1/2 inch chunks. We'll clean it up on the planer. This is something that you could probably do on a table saw if you've got pieces like this you're starting with. So this is Spanish cedar. It's not particularly dense. It's nice and stiff, so it actually makes a great kerfing. But and it's not very tall here. So you could do this on the table saw and get pretty good results, and then maybe not have to even clean it up on the planer. But then I've got this other chunk here. This is what, maybe 3.5 inches of sapele. That's going to be like, even if your table saw blade can get that high, that's a whole lot to dig through. So this is really better and safer to do on something like a bandsaw. So let's go ahead and get going, and we'll cut some slices of these with the bandsaw. Okay, now we're at the planer and we want to take this down to 1/4 inch-ish. We're at 5/16 now. We sort of get our first height. There's a little gauge here that pushes in that tells you how much you're taking off. We got a couple things extra here. So we've got a couple sticks to go in before our slats and after our slats, so that we can help prevent snipe. Got our calipers to keep us honest between passes so we don't get too far. And let's get going. Everything's nice and dimensioned, or 1/4 inch thick. This is a nice safe thing to do on the table saw. assuming, you know, you do normal table saw safe things. But so we're going to go ahead and do our 1/2 inch rips on the table saw. I'm going to use a feather board here and a push stick because this is pretty sketchy to get my fingers around. So let's go ahead and do that. So now we've got a bunch of blanks in various species. So I've got my Spanish cedar, I've got my basswood, I've got my sapele, and they all make fine kerfing. The next thing we have is this jig right here. This is basically your bog standard crosscut jig, but it's got a little fence there to keep things supported. So we were going to put this on against here. We've got a couple marks here to know where to make our next step. And then we come in here and I want to leave about 25 thousandths of an inch for my sort of the part that doesn't get cut. So we just go ahead and put this against there, and then we take a clamp, make sure that we're not moving any further. Yep, we still got the gap we expect. And then we're going to start doing cross cuts. Now there's a couple things on this sled that I kind of want to draw a little bit of attention to. So sawdust will accumulate on the bed. So I've got this undercut a little bit so that I don't end up with like a flat spot here and sawdust builds up and the depth of my cut changes over time. So I don't know if it's readily apparent. Yeah, so it's just cut out a little bit so that any stray sawdust will go into here, and then this will bump up against the clamp to keep our cuts consistent. And then we have marks here. So I'll make a cut and then I'll advance to so that the previous cut is where this pencil mark is, and then make another cut, and then repeat and rinse and repeat the whole way through. So now I'm not going to do the whole thing on video. I'll do a little bit so you can see how it goes. The one thing that, you know, you just want to be really careful with is as you get towards the end, you could get awfully close to the blade. So I've got some red marks here to just try to kind of remind me where my fingers should not be. And then because it is so repetitive, you can really get into some hypnosis here. So try and make sure that you don't sort of space out and, you know, chop the tip of a finger off. All right, let's go ahead and do this. Now we're all done. We've got some wonderful kerfing. I do reverse style, so it'll be kind of like this. Tends to give a little bit stiffer side, which I like. Now, when you look at the kerfing, some of you'll have a little bit of tear out on the bottom like this, and depending on the wood, it may be kind of ugly. I mean, this is the basswood. The basswood is kind of strandy. The sapele is not too bad, and the Spanish cedar is about the same as the sapele. But what I do is that is what goes to the top or bottom, and this is going to be sanded off anyways once you've applied it, and then you re-radius. Now these things go for like $6 each, so for me it's kind of worth my time to crank them out this way, and I can get exactly the wood that I want and match what I'm doing on my guitar. So if this is the kind of content you like, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you at the next one.